The photographs spread across my kitchen table told a story I never thought I'd read, one of calculated deception that had been quietly writing itself for months. Even now, with evidence in hand, part of me wanted to deny what my eyes were telling me. My name is Henry Rowland, and I'm 32 years old. Each morning I wake at 6, make coffee in the same ceramic mug, and check our shared calendar, a routine that once felt like the foundation of a solid marriage. Every receipt I'd questioned, every late-night networking event, every evasive smile from my wife had been a thread in a larger tapestry of lies. But I wouldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. I'd document everything, preserve every piece of evidence, and build an airtight case. But let me start from the beginning. Looking back, I should have noticed sooner. The first red flag appeared in our monthly budget review, a ritual we'd maintained since buying the house. Agnes used to sit beside me at the kitchen table, her shoulder warm against mine as we tracked every dollar. That March evening, she called out from the living room instead, "Just handle it, honey. I trust you." The trust part was a lie, of course. I found the first questionable receipt wedged in her coat pocket while doing laundry. $200 at a boutique downtown, but our shared calendar showed her at a client dinner that night. When I smoothed out the crumpled paper, the date stamp read 3:15 p.m. Remember how your mother taught you to fold laundry? Mine insisted on precise corners, everything lined up just so. That discipline served me well as I started documenting discrepancies. Every receipt, every late night, every withdrawal, I logged them all in a spreadsheet, columns expanding like a map of deception. Another networking event? I asked one evening as Agnes slipped on her heels, the expensive ones she'd started wearing more often. "You know how it is in sales," she replied, adjusting her blazer in the hallway mirror. Relationships are everything. I watched her smile in the reflection. It was perfect, practiced, and hollow as a stage prop. The expression didn't touch her eyes anymore, hadn't for weeks. That's when I started checking our savings account more carefully. The numbers told their own story. Small withdrawals at first, nothing that would trigger immediate alarm. But they added up, 500 here, 800 there. Each time I questioned a transaction, Agnes had an explanation ready. Car repairs, a friend's emergency loan, professional development courses. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. Rage clouds judgment, and I needed clarity more than catharsis. Instead, I photographed bank statements, took screenshots of our account activity, and noted every inconsistency in a password-protected file. One night, after discovering another unexplained $2,000 withdrawal, I sat in my truck in the empty parking lot at work. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. For the first time since suspicions started growing, I let myself break. My hands shook as they covered my face. The breath caught in my chest felt like shattered glass. "You're wrong," I whispered to the steering wheel. "Please let me be wrong." But the evidence didn't lie. Through the windshield, I watched dawn paint the sky in shades of truth I couldn't ignore. My eyes were red, but my hands were steady as I wiped away the last tears I'd allow myself over this betrayal. I started the engine, heading home to organize my files. The morning light streamed through my home office window as I labeled folders with dates and categories. No more guessing. No more hoping I'd misread the signs. I would gather proof until denial lost its hiding places. Each document went into its proper place. Financial records, timestamps, photos of receipts. The growing stack of evidence felt like armor against the fog of uncertainty. I needed facts sharp enough to cut through any lies, clear enough to show in any court. The timestamp on my phone glowed like an accusation. 8:47 p.m. Wednesday night. Agnes's book club met from 7 to 9, just 3 blocks away at Marion's house. But the rideshare receipt placed her clear across town, in the business district where most shops had already closed. I waited at our kitchen table, the charge details pulled up on my laptop. The steady tick of our wall clock marked each minute until her key turned in the lock at 9:40. "How was book club?" I kept my voice neutral as she set down her purse. "Oh, you know." Agnes slipped off her coat. "We're still working through that mystery novel. Marion made these amazing lemon squares." My finger traced the edge of my laptop. "Interesting route to get there. Through the business district?" She paused, one heel dangling from her fingers. "What?" "The rideshare receipt." I turned the screen toward her. "It shows you got dropped off on Commerce Street at 8:47. Agnes's laugh held a note of steel. "You're tracking me now? Checking my rides?" "Joint account," I reminded her. The charges show up automatically. If you must know, she said, setting her shoe down with precise movements. I was planning a surprise for you, a birthday thing. My birthday wasn't for 5 months. Show me the receipt from whatever you bought. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Agnes's jaw tightened, a muscle flickering beneath her smooth skin. I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own home. She crossed her arms. This controlling behavior? It's concerning. Asking for clarity isn't control. I kept my hands flat on the table, anchoring myself. If there's a receipt, this ends now. You want to talk about receipts? Her voice pitched higher. What about that lunch charge from last week? The one at that diner? Business meeting with clients. I texted you about it that morning. I pulled up the message thread. Timestamped 8:32 a.m. Wednesday. She switched tactics, tears welling up. I can't believe you don't trust me, after everything we've built together. Trust requires truth, I said quietly. I'm just asking for the receipt. God, listen to yourself. She threw up her hands. This obsession with proof, with tracking every little thing. You're not the man I married. I thought of the growing folder on my laptop, each discrepancy cataloged. Maybe I'm seeing things more clearly now. You know what? I'm done. Agnes grabbed her purse. I won't stand here while you accuse me of whatever this is. When you're ready to apologize, I'll be in the guest room. Agnes. My voice stopped her at the doorway. One receipt. That's all it would take. She turned, and for a moment, I caught something calculating behind the tears. The fact that you need one says everything. The door didn't slam. Agnes never slammed doors, but closed with a soft click that somehow felt louder. I sat there, staring at the rideshare receipt on my screen, the route traced in blue across a city map. The numbers didn't lie. The timeline didn't bend. And in the space where a simple store receipt should have been, her story held nothing but air. The next morning, I called Oscar Kumar. Some friendships run so deep you don't need to explain. Just hearing my voice, he said, "Coffee, 20 minutes, that diner on Marshall." I arrived first, claiming our usual corner booth. The morning rush had died down, leaving only the soft clink of cups and the hum of conversations too distant to make out. Oscar slid in across from me, his dark eyes taking in my wrinkled shirt and the shadows under my eyes. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, ordering coffee with a gesture to the waitress. "Remember when we'd come here after pulling all-nighters in college?" The memory of easier times caught in my throat. Back then, exhaustion meant finals week, not... I pushed the printed rideshare receipt across the table. Oscar studied it, his expression unchanging. When our coffee arrived, he took a measured sip before speaking. "Tell me everything." I laid it out. The late nights, the dwindling accounts, yesterday's confrontation. Oscar listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a napkin with the pen he always carried. The diner's bell chimed as customers came and went, but our corner remained our own, a space where truth could breathe. "Book club meetings don't need ride shares across town," he said finally, "and surprise gifts come with receipts." I know. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. But every time I try to pin down facts, she turns it around. Suddenly I'm controlling, paranoid, breaking her trust by asking questions. Oscar's pen tapped against his notepad. "You need Riley Trent." A PI? The idea hadn't occurred to me. Veteran investigator, ex-military. Does things by the book. Everything documented, time-stamped, admissible if needed. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. Let facts talk, Henry. No more fog. 3 days later, I sat in Riley's sparse office, writing a check that made my hand shake slightly. But his steady gaze and methodical questions settled something in my chest. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was pursuit of truth. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it at my kitchen table, the house empty and quiet. Agnes had texted earlier, "Working late, don't wait up." The timestamp on that message, 7:43 p.m. The photos slid out in sequence. Agnes's car pulling into the Starlight Motel parking lot at 7:52 p.m., her familiar figure walking to room 118. Then the devastating final shot, Agnes leaving at 10:57 p.m., followed by a man I'd never seen before. My hands didn't shake as I checked our shared account app. There it was, a cash withdrawal of $300, time-stamped 7:46 p.m., just before she'd texted. Just before she'd... The date in the corner of the photos caught my eye. I circled it with a red pen, the ink stark against the glossy paper. Our anniversary week. 13 years of shared life, reduced to 3 hours in a motel room that I'd paid for with our joint account. My stomach clenched, but I kept my breathing steady as I laid the photos side by side. The mystery man's face was clear in the last shot, caught under the motel's harsh lights. He had his hand on the small of Agnes's back, familiar in a way that spoke of practice, of routine. I stared at that point of contact, his hand, her smile, the casual intimacy of their exit, and felt the last whisper of doubt evaporate. Suspicion had been a weight. But certainty? Certainty was a stone dropping through still water, sending ripples I couldn't call back. Riley's next update came 3 days later. He'd requested a meeting in person, which sent a chill down my spine. Whatever he'd found, it wasn't the kind of news you deliver by email. His office smelled of coffee and old paper files. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, then pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You holding up okay?" he asked, his weathered face showing genuine concern. "I'm managing." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "What did you find?" He spread photos across the desk like dealing cards. "First, the phone records. Your wife opened a prepaid line 6 months ago." He tapped a store receipt. "Paid cash, but we got lucky. She used your joint card for gas at the same location, same day. Timestamp puts her there." My throat tightened. 6 months. While I'd been planning our summer vacation, she'd been planning this. The number shows consistent contact with this individual. Riley laid down another document, a call log dense with highlighted timestamps. Multiple daily communications, usually during her lunch break or when you're at work. I remembered all those "sorry" in a meeting texts, the times I'd eaten dinner alone. "But that's not what concerned me enough to call you in." Riley's voice took on a harder edge. He pulled out bank statements, copies I hadn't seen before. "These are from an account opened 3 months ago, your wife's name only." The withdrawals jumped out at me. $500 here, $700 there. Small enough to fly under radar, large enough to build up. Our savings had been dropping, but I'd assumed it was the home repairs we'd planned. Total amount moved, just over $27,000. Riley's pen traced the column of numbers. All cash withdrawals, no paper trail for where it went. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That was our emergency fund, our future security. But Riley wasn't finished. From a separate folder, he extracted a document that made my blood run cold. This was found in her cloud storage. Draft affidavit, never filed. Yet. My eyes caught phrases that stopped my breath. Pattern of controlling behavior. Financial abuse. Fears for her safety. The date at the top hit me like a physical blow. 8 weeks ago. Before any confrontation. Before I'd even noticed the rideshare receipt. "This isn't an affair gone wrong," Riley said quietly. "This is calculated. The burner phone, the hidden account, this affidavit, it's all groundwork. Preparation." I stared at my hands, which had started trembling despite my best efforts. The timeline crystallized with horrible clarity. While I'd been asking about book club meetings, she'd been documenting imaginary abuse. While I'd worried about our dwindling savings, she'd been building a separate life. While I'd thought we were having our first real argument, she'd already drafted accusations that could destroy my name, my career, my future. "The good news," Riley continued, "is we've documented everything. The bad news is she was never going to tell me the truth," I finished, "because this was the plan all along." The affidavit sat between us like a live wire. My fingers brushed its edges, tracing the date she'd typed so carefully, remembering exactly where I'd been that day. Fixing the back porch light, wondering if she'd noticed the improvement when she got home. I called Oscar the moment I left Riley's office. My hands were still shaking as I pulled into his driveway 20 minutes later. "Show me everything," he said, clearing space on his kitchen table. The familiar scent of his wife's curry lingered in the air. On any other evening, I'd have been invited to stay for dinner. I spread out Riley's findings, watching Oscar's expression darken as he absorbed each document. When he reached the affidavit, his jaw clenched. "This is..." He paused, controlling his anger. "Henry, this is beyond manipulation. This is fraud." "I know." The words felt hollow in my throat. Oscar pulled out his phone, checking the time. "It's 4:30. If we move now, we can file emergency petitions before close of business." His fingers flew across his laptop keyboard. The affidavit proves intent to defraud. Combined with the hidden account and cash withdrawals, we've got grounds to freeze everything joint. I leaned forward. "Everything?" "Checking, savings, investment accounts, anything with both names." He looked up sharply. "Have you checked your credit report recently?" "Last week. Nothing unusual except—" My stomach dropped. There was a credit inquiry from Meridian Bank. I thought it was junk mail. Oscar's typing intensified. "Meridian handles home equity lines." He spun the laptop toward me. "Sign here. We're filing to block any pending credit applications. If she forged your signature—" She did. The certainty hit me. "She's tried to take out a line against the house." "Not anymore." Oscar's voice carried steel. "Not after this filing hits the system." We spent the next hour signing documents, my signature growing steadier with each page. By 5:45, Oscar had submitted everything electronically. "First wall's up," he said. "Now we need official validation of Riley's evidence." Detective Prieto met us at his precinct the next morning. He reviewed Riley's logs methodically, comparing timestamps, cross-referencing bank records against the PI's surveillance notes. "The technical work is solid," he said, finally tapping the folder. "Documentation of fund movements aligns perfectly with observed activities. No gaps, no inconsistencies." He met my eyes directly. "Your timeline is clean. This corroborates." Relief loosened the knot in my chest. Having a detective confirm what I knew somehow made it more real, more actionable. "The forged credit application," Prieto continued, "that elevates this considerably. I'm forwarding copies to financial crimes. They'll want statements." I gathered the files carefully, noting how much thicker the stack had grown since yesterday. Bank records, surveillance photos, the damning affidavit, and now Detective Prieto's preliminary report. Each page a brick in the wall I was building between my wife's schemes and my future. Oscar gripped my shoulder as we left the precinct. "You're doing this right, Henry. By the book. With proof." I nodded, but my fingers tightened on the files. The evidence was solid, the timeline validated, and the accounts frozen. Yet something in my gut warned that we'd only uncovered the surface. There was more. There had to be more. And every hour that passed was another hour she had to spin her web. The late afternoon sun caught the edge of the affidavit peeking from my folder, that carefully dated document that proved she'd planned my destruction while still sleeping beside me each night. Time wasn't just moving. It was running out. The sunset painted long shadows across our front yard as I pulled into the driveway. Agnes's car sat in its usual spot, a sight that once meant comfort, but now just reminded me of carefully crafted appearances. I remembered summer evenings when we'd sit on the porch sharing ice cream, back when I thought her soft smile held truth. My footsteps echoed on the concrete path to our door. Before I could insert my key, it swung open. Agnes stood there in her workout clothes, hair pulled back in that perfect ponytail she wore when trying to look casual. "Oh," she said, voice light. "I thought I heard someone." I met her gaze steadily. "We need to talk." "Henry, I'm actually heading to—" "I know about the motel." The words landed between us like a stone dropping into still water. For just a moment, her careful mask slipped. She blinked once, twice. Then that familiar, calculating smile spread across her face, the one I'd seen too many times lately during her denials. "The motel?" She tilted her head, affecting confusion. "What are you talking about?" 3 hours, last Thursday." My voice stayed level. "The Sunset Inn on Riverside Drive." Her smile sharpened. "You're tracking me now? Following me?" She shook her head, eyes gleaming. "You know how this will look, right? You'll come across as paranoid in court." The threat hung there, confirming everything Riley had uncovered about her preparations. "Then let the evidence speak," I replied quietly. Something flickered behind her eyes, uncertainty, maybe fear, but her smile never fully faded. "Evidence? You mean your obsessive note-taking? Your— what? Amateur detective work?" She adjusted her gym bag on her shoulder. "I'm late for spin class." I stepped aside, letting her pass. As she reached her car, she turned back. "You should talk to someone, Henry. This isn't healthy." The garage door hummed shut behind her car, leaving me alone with the weight of what was coming. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Final package ready. Time sensitive." I met him in the empty parking lot of a 24-hour diner. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as he handed me a thick manila envelope. "Everything's indexed," he said. "Page numbers correspond to the timeline in front." I opened the envelope under the dome light of my truck. The motel footage was crystal clear. Timestamps matched perfectly with the bank withdrawals. A notarized lease agreement bore both their signatures, dated months back. Each document built upon the last, constructing an airtight narrative of deception. Then I reached the final section. My hands shook as I read the email thread. Agnes and her lover discussing my mother's trust, the one she'd left specifically to help me pursue my dreams of starting my own business. They'd planned it methodically, wait for a no-fault divorce, then drain the trust while I was still reeling. "He'll never contest it," Agnes had written. "He'll be too focused on saving face after the affidavit goes public." The diner's neon sign buzzed overhead as I stared at her words. My mother had passed just 18 months ago. The trust was her final gift, her way of supporting my future even after she was gone, and Agnes had targeted it before her body was even cold. Riley's voice cut through my thoughts. "There's more on the next page." I arranged the meeting for 10 a.m. sharp at Oscar's law office. The conference room felt too warm despite the morning chill outside, its mahogany table stretching between us like a battlefield. I kept my hands steady as I arranged 3 identical folders, each labeled with Post-its and tabs. Agnes arrived first, wearing the cream blazer she saved for important meetings. Her heels clicked decisively on the hardwood as she took her seat across from me. The familiar scent of her perfume, vanilla and jasmine, brought back memories of happier mornings that now felt like photographs from someone else's life. "This is unnecessary," she said, smoothing her skirt. "We could have handled this privately." Oscar sat beside me, his presence solid and grounding. "Given the circumstances, Mrs. Rowland, this is exactly how we need to proceed." The door opened again. Agnes's companion, James, according to Riley's files, stepped in wearing an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his discomfort. He hesitated before taking the chair beside Agnes, their shoulders not quite touching. "Now that we're all here," I began, my voice calmer than my thundering pulse, "let's review the timeline." Agnes's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "Timeline of what exactly?" I opened the first folder. "Let's start with the Sunset Inn, March 15th, 4:27 p.m. I laid out the photos, each one dated and time-stamped. Your car arriving, both of you entering room 112, leaving at 7:43 p.m. "That proves nothing," Agnes cut in, but her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "The bank withdrawal of $300 at 4:15 p.m. that day matches the motel's daily rate plus incidentals." I placed the bank statement beside the photos, as do similar withdrawals on February 28th, March 3rd, and March 10th, all corresponding to these time-stamped photos. James shifted in his chair. "This is harassment." "The lease agreement," I continued, sliding out the notarized document, "signed by both of you in January, 3 months before I noticed anything wrong. The property manager confirmed the signatures and provided security footage of the signing." Agnes's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "You had me followed?" "After finding this." I produced the draft affidavit she'd prepared. "Dated 2 weeks before our first discussion about any problems. Interesting timing." The room fell silent, except for the soft whir of the air conditioning. Oscar methodically arranged additional documents, bank records, email transcripts, notarized statements from witnesses. "The evidence speaks for itself," Oscar said, his tone professional, "including the attempted unauthorized access to Mr. Rowland's mother's trust fund." Agnes's face paled. She turned to James, who suddenly seemed intensely interested in his cufflinks. A knock at the door made us all look up. The court clerk stepped in, her expression neutral. "Judge Morrison will see you now." I gathered the folders, each piece of evidence carefully preserved and indexed. As we stood to follow the clerk, Agnes caught my eye. "Henry," she started, her voice softer now, almost like before. "We can still—" "No," I said quietly. "We really can't." The judge's chambers waited down the hall, where facts would finally triumph over fiction. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the door that would lead to the truth. Judge Morrison's chambers felt smaller than the conference room, every breath and shuffle magnified in the close space. The morning sun slanted through Venetian blinds, casting stripes across the stack of evidence folders on her desk. She adjusted her reading glasses, studying the first document with the kind of focus that made my chest tighten. "Let's begin with the home equity line of credit application," she said, her tone measured. "Filed March 3rd of this year." She held up the paper, showing my supposed signature. "Mr. Rowland, is this your handwriting?" "No, Your Honor." My voice stayed steady. "I never signed that document, nor authorized anyone to sign on my behalf." The judge nodded, then turned to Agnes. "Mrs. Rowland, can you explain this discrepancy?" Agnes straightened in her chair. "Henry and I discussed this loan." He must have forgotten. I have the bank security footage from that day, Detective Prieto interrupted, stepping forward from where he'd been waiting. He placed a USB drive on the judge's desk. Mrs. Rowland is clearly visible submitting these documents alone at 2:17 p.m. Mr. Rowland was verifiably at his workplace during this time. I watched Agnes's shoulders tense. The familiar scent of her perfume now felt cloying in the small room. Judge Morrison played the footage on her computer, the screen angled away from us. Her expression remained neutral, but her jaw tightened slightly. She turned to the next document. This affidavit, she continued, alleging abuse and instability. She paused, scanning the text. Dated February 12th, yet the first documented dispute between you and your husband wasn't until February 26th, according to both parties' testimonies. I was afraid, Agnes began, her voice taking on that tremulous quality I'd heard so often lately. I needed to protect. The metadata on the document's creation shows it was drafted on a laptop registered to James Carson. Detective Prieto cut in again, his tone professional but firm. We've confirmed the IP address matches Mr. Carson's home office. The sun had shifted, the striped shadows now falling across Agnes's face. I noticed her left hand gripping the armrest, knuckles white. Furthermore, Prieto continued, our investigation has uncovered a pattern of coordinated financial transactions. He stepped forward, laying out a timeline that matched Riley's findings perfectly. The motel visits correlate exactly with specific withdrawals. The lease agreement predates any marital discord, and there's documented evidence of attempts to access Mr. Rowland's mother's trust fund through unauthorized channels. I kept my breathing even, watching the judge process each piece of evidence. The clock on her wall ticked loudly in the silence. Mrs. Rowland, Judge Morrison said finally, looking up from the papers. Do you have any response to these findings? Agnes glanced at James, then back to the judge. This is all circumstantial. Henry's paranoia. The evidence is neither circumstantial nor subject to interpretation, the judge interrupted, her tone sharp. These are documented facts, Mrs. Rowland. Verified timestamps, notarized statements, banking records. Security footage. She removed her glasses, folding them deliberately as she looked at each of us in turn. The air felt thick with tension. I've reviewed everything thoroughly, she said, straightening the folders with precise movements, and I am prepared to make my ruling. She paused, hands clasped on top of the damning stack of evidence, and the moment stretched like a wire pulled taut. Judge Morrison's voice carried the weight of certainty. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court finds in favor of Mr. Henry Rowland. She lifted the first document. The attempted access to the trust fund was clearly fraudulent. Mr. Rowland will retain sole control of his mother's trust, with additional protections put in place against future unauthorized attempts. My chest loosened slightly. I thought of Mom's photo on my desk at home, her gentle smile that had always carried such strength. Furthermore, the judge continued, the forged equity line application and the false affidavit constitute serious violations. She fixed Agnes with a stern gaze. This court cannot ignore apparent perjury. Mrs. Rowland, you will face sanctions for these actions. Your claims against the marital assets are hereby reduced by 40%. Agnes's breath caught audibly. I kept my eyes forward, maintaining the same calm I'd held onto through every revelation. The family home, Judge Morrison added, shuffling to another document, will be awarded to Mr. Rowland. The mortgage remains solely in his name, and the property assessment confirms his separate property contribution exceeded joint equity. She looked at me directly. You may take possession immediately. Oscar's hand found my shoulder, a steady grip that anchored me as the ruling settled into reality. This court is adjourned. The judge gathered her papers. Mr. Rowland, you may collect the final order from my clerk. Outside, the morning had brightened into full dawn. Oscar drove us to the hardware store, then to the house, my house now, secured by truth and law. We worked methodically, replacing each lock with precise movements. The screwdriver felt solid in my hand, each turn of the screws a small act of restoration. You did this right, Oscar said quietly as we finished the front door. Every step, you chose evidence over anger. I nodded, testing the new deadbolt. The mechanism moved smoothly, like justice finally clicking into place. Inside, morning light streamed through the kitchen windows. I stood at the counter holding a single new key. Oscar had helped me pick out a simple silver ring for it. Nothing fancy, just clean and strong. I set it down, watching sunlight catch the fresh metal. The house felt different now. Emptier, yes, but clean, like after a storm passes and the air carries that rare clarity. I traced the key's edge with one finger, remembering all the documents, all the careful steps that had led to this moment. "Justice is quiet when it finally arrives," I said softly, and Oscar nodded, understanding in his eyes. The key gleamed on its new ring, a small symbol of truth's victory, and my own.